Hello and welcome to Bluff It Question and Answer. Bluff It is Real Ideas series of short videos presented by artists and focused on specific techniques and tips for people to master. Originally, we developed this as a support for home working parents of 7 to 11-year-olds, and they're designed to give parents the edge and enable them to bluff it in style and engage and support their children in creative activity with confidence. Of course, they're suitable for anybody wanting to benefit from simple ideas and techniques. We launch them weekly on a Monday on our Facebook page. Today, I'm joined by 3 Bluff It artists from the series who are going to answer a few questions and share a few handy hints and tips to keep you going with your Bluff It. So I'd like to welcome artist and lecturer Caroline Mercer, artist and Loki Collective member Fran Hawksworth, and animator and projection mapper Jamie Knight. We've had a number of questions submitted, and we're going to work through those and hopefully develop a little bit of conversation as we go. So what I'll do is, firstly, I'll ask each of the artists to briefly introduce themselves and why they chose the art focus they did for their video. Caroline, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for having me and inviting me to do this. So my name's Caroline Mercer. I'm a lecturer at Plymouth University for Education, and my specialism is art. I also have I run my own business and art school called Outside the Box, which is for children and for adults as well. And I'm an artist myself, so I draw and I make. And I chose doodling really to demystify how we can start drawing. So a lot of people say to me, I can't draw, but doodling is something that when you look at the definition, it says a motor activity, which is a lot of people do when they're focused on something else. And there's no real pressure to produce something that is perfect and finished and displayable. So when you get children doodling, they're not thinking about, is this right? They're just thinking about making the marks. They're very much in the moment. So it's a really lovely way in. Most people know what doodling is, and anyone can do it. So as long as you can hold a pencil and or any mark making tool, and you've got a surface to create on, you can start. And that's why I chose it as a way in. There's lots of benefits, which we'll talk about later, but that's why I chose it.
Lovely, thank you. Fran, what about you?
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Caroline. So I'm Fran, and I'm an artist based in Plymouth. I also work for the Real Ideas organisation as a programme coordinator. And on another hat, I'm a Visual Arts Plymouth activator. So I'm quite engaged within the arts within the city. I specialise in murals mostly at the moment, and really I use collage to start and inform my visual language. So I find it's a really good starting point to inform other things. So that's why I chose it as the Bluff It.
Thank you. And Jamie, over to you.
Hi, I'm Jamie Knight. I'm an animator and projection mapper based in the Southwest. I also work for the Real Ideas organisation, doing lots of different stuff around our media. I worked on like festivals all over the world. I chose stop motion animation for our Bluff It video because it's so accessible, and it's a really nice way to sort of create stories with your family and convey ideas, and it's quite meditative as well, the process of it. So that's why I went for that.
Lovely, thank you. It's interesting just to pick up 2 things there, really. How important is it to do the demystifying of art? How much is it people's biggest fear is about being perfect with it and stalling with starting? Caroline, all of you have talked these really simple ways, really direct ways. Is it okay to demystify art, or should we be keeping it secrets a little bit more? What do you think? Fran, I'm going to ask you first.
I don't think it should be a secret. I think lots of people can create things, and I think we all visualize things differently. So I think we all have our own approach. I think people do try and perfect art, and they try and create the actual thing that they're looking at, but it doesn't need to be like that. So I think even if you learn collage in one way or doodle in one way, everyone is so different. Nobody's exactly the same. And I think if we were all the same, that'd be really boring. So I think we can share and learn skills from each other, and that's absolutely fine, because the outcome is going to be different, ideally.
And Caroline, as a lecturer and supporting education students, teachers of the future, do you find that they worry about art and how to deliver it?
Oh yeah, very much so. I think it can be a barrier that so teacher confidence and teacher. I think a lot of it's perceived confidence and experience, and I think some genuinely great learning happens when the teacher is learning alongside the children. So if you put out some materials and you say, let's have a go and see what can happen, obviously in a controlled way or a purposeful way, you can learn alongside the children. So teachers and parents have this, sometimes, I'm being general here as well, but have this thing, I can't do art, I can't draw, it doesn't look like anything. But art doesn't have to look like anything. And I totally agree with Fran. Just share it. Share your skills. Share what you know, because you're going to learn. You're never really totally the expert. And that's what is so lovely about learning and learning in art, because you can make mistakes and they're safe mistakes, but you can learn how to overcome a mistake in art, because you don't have to show it to anybody. You can put it to one side, you can keep it in a sketchbook, you can store it for a rainy day. But yeah, I think it's really important to just start somewhere. So if it's ripping a piece of paper, or it's modelling a little model for a stop motion, or it's just doodling, you start somewhere and then you grow from there.
Thank you. Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, but I know that for myself, there's two different sides of it as well. So I know I'm guilty of doing two different things. So one of them is around probably it being finished, not perfect. So anything that I'm creating for that I know is going to be for the public eye, then, you know, it's around sort of getting over your inhibitions of just getting it finished and not perfect. And you know that it needs to go out there, and you need to open yourself up to that vulnerability to be able to then sort of get the critical feedback to know what's being well received, what's not, and all that professional gauging of it. But it's nice also, and I know for me as well, there's been an animator, there's this sort of transitional period between it going away from the paper medium and into a digital format, so making everything on the computer. And a lot of those sort of processes get lost. Like there's no just quick doodling anymore on the back of an envelope or a cereal packet anymore. It's all your rough doodling is done and then able to be like redone digitally on the computer. I think it's really nice to be able to go back to that traditional format. Especially, I always have a physical sketchbook with me, and it's within that sketchbook. My work generally is quite out there and open to the public, but with my sketchbooks, I find I'm quite guarded with them, and I keep them quite close to my chest, because that's my space where I'm able to sort of try new things and do lots of things where I know I'm creating a space that nobody's going to sort of look at that and sort of judge where I'm going with things. So I'm able to be a lot freer with what I put inside of a sketchbook, knowing that it's just about experimentation. There's no right or wrong answer with that. So that's very liberating in that sense. So,
and I think that it's quite useful that one of the questions we've had in is what's the best way to get over the fear of getting started? And I think we've touched on that a little bit. But again, for each of you, what would you say? What are the best ways to get over that fear? Caroline?
I guess going back to I'm just thinking about what Jamie's saying as he was saying it, is that it depends on your purpose. So exactly, if I know I've got an audience, my process is slightly different. If I'm doing something just for me, I think of my sketchbook as a thinking laboratory. It's like a place where things bubble up or put them away, or suddenly things become very important. And I want to really work that and hone it and own it. But I think that if just to get started, if you think about it as something for you, you're not going to show anybody. And it's just something that's going to help you to do something. So like when Fran was saying, it's sort of, it starts her ideas off. Take the pressure off yourself, and it's only you that's going to look at it. That helps me, because my inhibitions disappear, and no one else is going to see it. So I can make those mistakes. As soon as I start making a mark, it then flows across the paper, and it's just something that's between myself and myself. Or the other thing is a little doodle that you might be making. So you make it into something. It could be for a bookmark for someone, and then you've got another purpose. That you're going to doodle it, and you're going to make something. You're going to give it to somebody, and you do get that feedback, and it's generally going to be quite kind and supportive feedback. So if you make something for a family member or your best friend, they're not going to be an art critic. They're going to say that's really lovely, and they're going to see the other side of the making, the purpose of the making. So there, two things to sort of get over that fear is make something for yourself, or make something for a friend. Phone a friend.
Jamie.
I think it's also, sorry, were you going to go through to Jamie?
No,
sorry.
Go for it.
I think it's really good to think about the things, your hobbies, your interests as well, things that you like to look for. So for me, I'm really interested in architecture, but also colour. So I think that's quite a good starting point for me to start playing around with ideas. It could be different colours placed on top of one another, or even drawing the space around me, looking at the different shapes in the room or buildings. So I think it's really useful for people to think about, I don't know, are they really interested in animals or food? Draw on your key interests as well, because then you're more likely to actually stick at it. I think, anyway.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
I suppose, like, for me, animation is a really deliberate process, and it can take a really long time. So I think, like, getting over sort of the reason, I suppose the original reason why to do something, or to get over a block of doing it, is I use comedy, I suppose. So I'll look and try and make sense of things, and you can use comedy as a bit of a guide. So anything that you do, I originally started animating just to make silly videos with my friends when I was very, very little, on like a really old piece of Microsoft animation software, and it was just more of a way of dealing with issues that were sort of potentially in our life at that point, and sort of turning it from potentially like serious issues into more like reflecting and making them a little bit sillier in a way of dealing with it, I think. And because animation is quite a drawn out, lengthy process, the actual act of animating is quite meditative, it's quite repetitive, you do it over and over again. And anything that you are sort of, because you're thinking in fractions of time rather than time as a whole, like blocks of time, anything that you're making quite deliberately. And I think as you're working through and you're creating that, anything that you do make is sort of needs to be worth making in the first place, whether you're conscious of what you're making or not. And two, that whilst you're making it, you're working through and thinking about what it is you're making, and sort of working through the ideas, and it gives you a space to think, I think. So it could be super silly what you're making, but it sort of allows you to detach yourself from reality and sort of give yourself a meditative space to sort of contemplate ideas.
And that's a really interesting area just to pick up. There are two things really that are linked to questions we've had. And I think one of them is that notion of meditative. The sense in which, yes, we're talking about Bluff It, we're talking about simple skills, we're talking about ways to get into art, but the extent to which the process of doing art is good for you. You've talked about, all of you have said in different ways, it's space to think and reflect and meditate a little bit. But would anybody like to kind of pick up on the sense in which the process of art is good for you, especially in lockdown times, and the importance of well-being for parents and children? Anybody want to put their hand up and go first?
Go on then.
Caroline, I think you just beat Fran by that much.
Yeah.
So
I was going to be ever so polite and say, no, you first, Fran. Well, I picked doodling particularly because of that, because traditionally it's something, an activity that we do when our brain is idling. You know, it's akin to kind of daydreaming, which is a wonderful space for your brain to be in when it's not externally directed or distracted by something else, external pressures. And it's something that you can do purposefully as well. You know, you're doing this. I could be creating a doodle to be published, or I could, like I was for the video, I was very aware that this was going to be shown, so I had a different purpose. But what we find is when our brain is doodling, that it goes into a default place. So it's a bit like daydreaming. You're in a very creative space where other things in your brain, like sleep, can be sorting themselves out. So it's a space to think, a space to, I find it very meditative, but it's also something that when I come out of that state, that, you know, this lovely flow state, that sometimes I feel a bit more refreshed, I feel a little better. So even if I just create some time to make, if I say I've got a very busy day on my laptop today, doing a lot of marking, I will miss that time, and I will at some point, whether it's at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, try and carve out a little bit of time to let my brain switch off and let it idle. I'm very good at sitting still. I'm not very good at sitting still, and so it gives me something to do if I'm feeling fidgety or distracted. I can use it as a conscious way to kind of focus, or I can use it as a way when I am, say, bored, which is not very often, but idling. So you've got two ways of looking at it. But yeah, it is very, very useful tool and a space to create, even if it's just 5 minutes. It does kind of reboot your brain, reset your brain.
Thank you very much, Fran.
I completely agree with you. I find there's something really interesting about the process of like putting forms on top of each other, and just playing around with materials, because you just switch off from everything completely in a way. I mean, sometimes you can be really precious with what you're placing, but there is also something where you just kind of almost go on automatic pilot and just start picking things up and playing, and things like the tactileness, that's probably not a word, of the pieces together. And I just think there's something, that it is like you're almost meditating in a way. But then on the flip side, you can get too precious, and then you can get really frustrated. So it's trying to get that balance of just keeping it really playful.
Thank you. Jamie, anything to add?
Yeah, I can totally go for the time to file your thoughts, I think, and start making sense. And I think absolutely it's just as important as that sleep time you get to be able to make sense of stuff. And I think that process of just being able to sort of subconsciously work through ideas, and just it's not just about making sense of potential problems and sort of finding solutions to those. It's also about that sort of idea creation and coming up with new things as well. I mean, there's something really unique and amazing about sketchbooks. Is you could be sat there one day doing a little doodle on one page, and then you pick it up 3 weeks later and start doodling next to the doodle in a completely different frame of mind. And then when you look at the two doodles together, it's those two completely different ideas merged together to then create a third completely original idea as well, because one influences the other. So there's lots of this subconscious sort of blending, collage really, of sort of idea and different headspaces, and how different ways you feel or thinking about one day can influence the other. And there's something really amazing and visual about that, I think. So yeah.
Can I ask a really quick question before I move on to the more formal ones? And this goes back to the notion that we're talking about parents and children particularly. And a very quick response. A lot of children, from my experience in teaching, and that's teaching English, will often, if they go wrong, they'll want to start again, rip it up, throw it away, start again. To what extent do you think, yes, you need to do that, or no, keep it, save it, use it again later? What's your thinking? Very, very briefly, Jamie.
I agree with both, actually. I think one, and I try and teach this in some of my workshops, is that you shouldn't be precious about your work, and you should be able to have the ability to create something and then smash it up and redo, so you're not attached to it in that way. But also, another thing that I teach in my workshops is that about creating permanent marks and not being precious again, about like thinking that something's wrong. And actually what you should do is evolve out of these happy mistakes, as Bob Ross would put it, like happy accidents, and how that influence and develop your work. So yeah, absolutely, do not be too precious about stuff, about rubbing stuff out, smushing stuff up and restarting. I suppose it's the way in which you're thinking, the direction, that it's not about what you're hoping to achieve. It's about like where you start and where you're going is more the point of it. And not
I guess for me, it's a little bit about the wrongness. We've got a culture, perhaps, in some ways, that children see things as either right or wrong, and it's getting over that. So it's not about wrongness; it's about a process. You were having a big smile.
It's a learning process going through. We all never stop learning. There's no such thing as perfection. So you know, if you think that you've got to the pinnacle of your field, you should probably quit, because you're not any better.
There is no pinnacle.
You know?
Yeah. Sorry, Fran, you go first this time.
No, you
Fran.
go.
Fran.
I'm trying to butt in today quite a lot. I find when I'm working, I'll work on like quite a few collages at once, and then I can sit back and kind of think about them. And if I think that they're really not right, sometimes I actually cut them up and then add them to new things. Try and be quite playful with it. I wouldn't throw anything away straight away if it doesn't look right. You may find a couple of days later there may be an element of it that you really, really like. Or just try and recycle and reuse, I find.
Yeah, I just going back to what, just falling off my chair here. Going back to what Jamie was saying, I think it also depends on the purpose. I think there's a time and a place where you do rip something up and put it in the bin, and there's a time and a place. I've got sketches from when I was sort of 14 and 15, and I first went to the Henry Moore exhibition in London, and I look back at those sketchbooks and I still use some of those marks, some of those forms, some of those ideas. They are sort of recurring, 30 years later, and it's quite interesting to look back on your own journey. So that there's that. But also, I think, talking about ideas emerging and reworking something, I try when I'm teaching children, and indeed my students, instead of expecting them to sit down and draw something really well straight away, I wouldn't get up and run a 10K straight away. I need to limber up. I need to practice. I need to bend and stretch. I need to do 2K first and then 3K. So I tend to give them some warm-up activities where it really doesn't matter. So, the sort of typical art school drawing activities where I might draw something and then hand it over to Fran to draw on top of, and then Jamie can glue something. So you get this feeling of ownership kind of out of the way, and you limber up and look at it in different ways. So sort of teach that way. But there are some activities and some materials which do require you to be really precise and to be really exact. And if you get it wrong, it is wrong. But this is what I would teach children. I would ask artists to talk to children about times when it's gone wrong, and perhaps think about the feelings that are associated with that. I think it's the feelings that children feel when it's gone wrong that stop it. It's not the wrongness itself, it's the feeling that they feel. And you can discuss that this doesn't mean failure, it doesn't mean the end, it doesn't mean never try again. I think that's the bit that you've got to step over. The work itself that's on the piece of paper, what you do with it is sort of, depends on the activity. But yeah, I think you definitely have to address this feeling of right or wrong. I think we would probably say in school, instead of right or wrong, it's helpful or not so helpful.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left, and we've got 3 questions if we can get them in. So I'm going to kind of be quite succinct with some of these. This one goes back to the whole issue again about being locked down, lots of people at home. how essential is it to have the proper kit to do art properly? And Jamie, I'm going to come to you first, because the whole issue around animation, perhaps, maybe people see that as an issue for having to get the right things to do it. So how essential is it to have the proper kit?
Not really. I mean, you can if you boiled like animation down into its key components, all it is it's illusion, and that's it. You've created animation if you can make something that doesn't live appear to have a life. So all you need is you can do it with post-it notes and a pencil, or you can, that's as easy as it can start off with, or you can do it with, a high-spec computer. It doesn't need, there's everything in between, so as long as and it's the Wild West still, it's still a very new practice. It's only been going around for like 100 years. So I think it's still very much open, and not everything's been done yet. I think as long as you can create that illusion of life, then you've achieved animation. So.
Okay, thank you. Fran, proper kit?
I don't think it's essential. I think that there is something really nice sometimes about buying new stationery or paper and new things, but there's so much in the house that you could use. It could be like a magazine that you don't use anymore, or rummaging through the recycle bin, or things that you may find out in the street on your walk around. I think the things like that are slightly better to work with, because I think they've almost got more of a story as well. But I mean, most people have Pritt Stick or PVA, cut or rip things. It's so easy. Yeah, you don't need to go out and buy stuff unless you're making a commission for somebody and they want something very, very specific. But yeah.
Caroline.
Yeah, I think probably doodling is the easiest of the lot. So you just need a pencil. You could do it on the back of a receipt, or some sort of pasta packet, But I think just enjoy the materials, because when you change your pen, if you like, I've got a biro in my hand, it makes a very different mark, and it is that feeling of being in the moment with doodling. You've got a lovely inky pen that runs across a shiny surface, or you've got this biro that scratches across a tough surface. It's just feeling those materials. You can just start with anything. So no, not essential, but you'd find your own preference, a bit like handwriting. You find your own style.
Okay, here's a bit of a cheeky question, again, quite quick. How often do you bluff it in your own practice, Caroline?
All the time. I would say if I'm talking about doodling, I doodling in particular, because that was what my Bluff It was about. I do Bluff It and doodle in my sketchbooks all the time. So I'm always thinking I can be marking. I hope none of my students are listening to this. I could be marking a dissertation and I've got a doodle going on in the corner, kind of helps me to focus. So I might be doing that. That might end up in one of my ceramic pieces later on. I don't know, because it's sort of happening somewhere where I can't see it. So yeah, all the time. And if I've just done a piece of work where I'm trying to learn something for an assessment that I'm doing, and I found myself doodling around this word, a particular word that I had to remember and know about. So that actually aided. That was an aid memoir, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I do it all the time, more than I thought. Actually, since I've done this video, I've noticed that I do it more than I thought that I realised.
Fran, what about you? Do you bluff it in your practice?
Yeah, I feel like I do quite a lot, actually. Especially, so I'm not a full-time artist, so quite often I'm dipping in and out of being creative. So sometimes I feel like I'm almost starting up again, even though I'm not. So it's almost that you take that leap of faith to try and test something new. So yeah, I feel like you always feel like you're bluffing it then, because you are testing, but also that's really exciting. So even if you are bluffing something, it could take you onto something else. Yeah.
Okay. Jamie.
Is it bluffing or economizing? And like that's how you push your boundaries, isn't it? By trying, to try and make the best use of your time and get as much done as possible. Whilst doing things a little bit differently. I think that's fundamental in being an artist and a disruptor, is to try things differently and cram in as much as you can.
Thank you. Okay, final question. We're nearly at time. If you could pass on one piece of advice to aspiring and probably struggling home artists, either our children or parents who are trying to do it, what's that one piece of advice that you would give to them? It might be a summary of things we've already talked about, but a final piece of advice to them. Jamie.
Make time, I'd say, is the best thing to do. Make time, because I'm super guilty of this. It's like, oh, I'll do that later. But I think if it's where your values lie, isn't it? So if you value it, you should make time for it. If it's important to you, make time for it. And it's not just about the sort of the end result of what you create. It's the process and who you're doing it with and what you get during. It's the journey. It's not the end result. Is what I'm saying. So make time for it is my best advice.
Thank you, Fran.
I would say persevere and stick at it. So if you do feel like you're hitting a bit of a brick wall sometimes, try and think about ways to adapt and overcome that. Because we don't always have creative days. Some days you may go into it and you may think, yeah, I'm going to be super creative today. Yeah. And then you get 5 minutes in and you're like, no, not for me. Don't use that as a stopping point to not trying it the next day or maybe in an hour's time. Just like stick at it.
Thank you. And Caroline, finally.
I would say keep it simple. Don't overthink it. Don't put too much emotion into it. You know, if it's getting on your nerves, like Fran said, it's maybe just not for you that day. Come back to it and you're feeling a bit more positive. And I would also say, look what's out there already. There's nothing wrong with looking like an artist or steal like an artist, magpie people's ideas, because there's some fantastic work going on and there's nothing wrong with copying. Go and have a look and see, you know, type in famous doodlers. You'll find an amazing Cambodian artist there. Even if you just copy his work over and over and over until you can make it yours and then fly on your own. That's what I would do.
Lovely. Thank you. So thank you to all of you for taking part today. For those of you watching, the videos from each of the artists are available on our Facebook page and our website. There are more coming. More from these artists and from others as well. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye to everybody. Bye.
Bye.